Peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the February 15th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. Props to those of you who are tuned in on Facebook Live. I don't even have my IG Live up, but I will get that up in a second. So shout out to y'all, even though you're supposed to be on YouTube, because again, I'm trying to monetize it by the year 20. I done pushed it back a little bit. You know what I mean? So by the year 2053, I'm able to monetize on YouTube. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. But I definitely appreciate everybody who was tuned in today. I also want to give a special shout out to the person that tried to hack into my Instagram and successfully made it into my Spotify account. I appreciate you. You let me know about some tunes that I wasn't quite aware of, so thank you. Keep up the good work. So with that said, we got a special show on tap. I feel like the Black Siskel and Ebert. Every week another conversation about another movie, a black movie in particular, which is always a beautiful thing. Every time we can discuss the art that we produce, it's so necessary. Especially this film that came out on this past Friday. I was able to see the early screening last week, and I was able to share that link with everybody in they mama, auntie, little brother, and puppy as well. Shout out to Lola, who was sitting over here on her pillow relaxing. So the movie that I am referencing is Judas and the Black Messiah, which is based on, I don't even want to call it a biopic because it wasn't necessarily a biopic, but just discussing the legacy and portraying the legacy of Fred Hampton to a certain extent. And we'll get into the reason why it might not necessarily be considered a biopic. I have some amazing guests on tap for this one. As I said to the panelists earlier, I'm a little nervous, right? Because I got Gabe over here. I didn't have Gabe on me and Gabe Polly all the time. I got Dr. Love on, who's an amazing brother. But it's this. Listen, it's Rosa. That's all I gotta say. I just gotta get a first name, right? Rosa. It's just like Madonna, right? You just get a first name and people know who she is. So I want to give a shout out to Rosa Clemente, organizer, journalist, activist, scholar for coming through. I definitely appreciate you. It's Al T. Farmer, good brother, who couldn't make it tonight. He saw that I had secured Rosa, and he was like, "Yo, you got her on?" And I said, "Listen, it's like Steph Curry pulling up from half court, man. If it goes in, it's a beautiful thing." Right, and it actually went in, and so I'm so glad to have you here to get your knowledge on this subject matter. So thank you for coming through. I want to give a shout out to Gabe Bryan. I know I just glossed over him, but he's a dope educator, activist, hip hop artist whose album Restoration is out now. If you missed that episode of Rhetorically Speaking, go on Phil MSW and watch it. It was dope. It was dope, and it's no other way to describe that. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Anya Love, educator, jazz enthusiast, the founder of the Cold Trade Symposium, which is a yearly event honoring the legacy of John Coltrane. So thank you all for coming through, taking some time out to talk with a brother.
Thank you, Phil.
No doubt, no doubt.
Yeah, brother.
So we're gonna get right into it. We're gonna get right into it. So we're talking about Judas and the Black Messiah. As I said, a biographical drama of the chairman Fred Hampton, who was the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. He was assassinated at the age of 21 by the Chicago PD, FBI, William O'Neill, and I don't want to say white folk in general, but just white folk in general. All those ill intended folk out there, because they all contributed to his death, which made his partner Deborah Johnson, a widow, which left his namesake Fred Hampton Jr. without the physical presence of his father. And so this film came out, and it's starring Lakeith, and it's hard for me to look at him at this stage of the game, as well as an amazing other cast of actors and actresses. But I want to get you all's take on the film. So I want to start with you, Rosa. So you were associate producer on the film, correct?
Yes, I was an associate producer on the film.
Were so what that did that entail exactly?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me on, and it's always good to see my brother Gabe. Like we've seen a lot. I think we've done a lot, and ultimately, if anything, I want this film for us to like understand that revolutionaries don't have a 401k, they don't have health care, that we got too many of our elders of 80 going on 81, some in their 70s, that are locked up for their political beliefs, that they're dying, that they're getting COVID and still surviving COVID, or like when we get Jalil Muntekin out, within a month he's rearrested because he made a mistake on an identification card, and that the Rochester police felt he was such a danger to society, I guess. Although the Rochester City in upstate New York is run by all Black people. So, the Black DA had to sign off on that rearrest, that now Jalil's facing a ridiculous charge. Um, and I want to say that from the beginning because there's been a lot of critiques, and I come from a place of being a social critic, but I also come from a place like, yo, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. had agency throughout this whole process. You know what I'm saying? It's a story that inspired by true events that include his dad, and his mother, Okua and Jerry, so I've been a little heated the last 2 days because I'm like, yo, people have mad critiques while some of us are really lucky that we can work from home and that one of our partners has health insurance and that I don't have to be out there. My family don't have to be out there working. My husband actually is out there working. He just had to move COVID students in a dorm. You know what I'm saying? And that people are like, it's not worth whatever resources came. It's like, we can't even support our political prisoners that are out right now. None of them have health insurance. Like, this is crazy, y'all. All that being said, this process was a 3-year journey. And it began when Brother Shaka King, who's from Brooklyn, we've been probably around the same circles, reached out to me. We're part of this Blackout Collective that Charles Keene, Ryan Coogler, and Ava DuVernay and Pastor Michael McBride started about 7 years ago, where a lot of these artists and filmmakers and such wanted some as activists and organizers at the table. And I've been there through that whole process. That's how me and Shaka really connected. He was the first person to give me money to go to Puerto Rico when I put together a media delegation to go down. So he hit me up like, yo, Chairman Fred? I was like, yeah, I do. And part of me knowing Chairman Fred is that when he was released from his incarceration, and Matulu and one of their press reached to me, and this was in 2001, like, yo, you think you could do a tour together? I said, yeah, I could do that. That was like 20 years ago. And I spent 2 years on the road with M1 and Chairman Fred, and a lot of love and struggle. And I was like, yeah, I'll call him, and within the next couple of months, we were at our first meeting in Chicago where Charles King was there, Shaka King, Ryan Coogler and his wife and producing partner, Cindy. And then when we were at this meeting, about 3 hours in, Ryan's like, yo, I think I saw you at a farmer's market in Oakland when I was younger, and they realized they have met before. So it's been this like 3-year long journey. And also the movie was supposed to come out in August of this past summer for Black August, but because of the pandemic, it had to get pushed. So a lot, 3 years worth of meetings, calls, love, struggle, and when it dropped, I was like, it's here now. It's up to us to do what we can with it.
Word, word. So speaking specifically to your role as an associate producer, so what were you tasked with?
Yeah, I was able to go to this set, and I'm really happy that I spent a couple days on the set with what I think is the defining scene in the movie. I won't spoil it for those who haven't seen it yet, but there's a church scene. And when Daniel is nominated for all the awards, maybe not, but definitely the Black and brown ones, that's the scene. And I was there, and I'll tell you, this was a 12-hour shoot. 16 times he did that exact
Wow.
scene. There was a
Wow.
moment where he just like took a moment and I was like, this is crazy. Like, then you see the element of production. And then Chairman Fred was on the set from, I think, day 2. He was on the set the whole time. And also that Chacha Jimenez, who Fred Hampton met
Yes,
and
yes.
helped turn the Young Lords. Chacha was there, you know, and
Hmm.
Chacha's watching. Also, like, it's traumatic, right? Like, here's Chacha watching and knowing and being one of the last people to see Chairman Fred and Deputy Mark Clark alive. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, my role was mostly like, you know, making the connection, keeping people together. I realized in the middle, I was like, oh, I'm the only woman. So I got to be the one that's like kind of playing more like I did end up playing more of the sisterly, motherly role, you know, and really just making sure that any support that Chairman Fred needed through this process, Ku and Jerry and all those that have been working in Chicago, um, that was really my role, you know, just make sure, not that he doesn't need me to be heard, but that, but also, you know, I did get a call one day from the set from Ryan where he's like, yo, where do we get a Puerto Rican flag? And I'm like, first, the berets are the wrong color. They weren't lilac, they're purple. So y'all gonna have to fix that. And I'm
Mm.
like,
They,
well, you
they,
can set a
they,
flag anywhere, but it's not gonna have the Puerto Rican blue flag. And you know, I put some notes in on that scene. But I think the role I played as an organizer and activist, and for those who knew that this was happening and all the build up to it, you know, I also think that play that role on some black and brown, like, you know, this is white supremacy's fear right now, is that we as quote black and other Latinx people, you know, don't come together. And that's exactly what Chairman Fred Hampton Sr., why he became dangerous and needed to be assassinated. They were like, you bringing all poor folks together, yeah, that's not going to work for us.
Word.
And lastly, the COINTELPRO, right? Like, consistently like telling folks, the minute this comes out, it's the moment we really teach again in all our spaces about the counterintelligence program. And I just saw this graph. I'll share it with y'all later. I'll send it to you so you can share with your audience. That Shaka sent me, and it looked at February 10th of how many times like COINTELPRO was searched, hundreds, thousands of times, and
Wow.
then it's a 450% increase from
Wow.
February 12th to the 14th, right? So I'm
Wow.
like, right, young people are learning, and like my daughter who's 16, who's been around it, but all of us now need to be like, yo, all of this that they're doing right now, all this infiltration and everything, and even understanding the supposed January 6th coup and insurrections. Like, nah, they were on it and they've been in on it for a long time. They just turning against themselves right now. They've been coming after us however long we've been here, but particularly in that 60s and 70s movement where it went from just civil rights to like black human rights and ending capitalism and self-defense. Once those became part of our organizing people, that's when they were all dangerous. And either they were assassinated, incarcerated, or completely marginalized, or had to go underground for years and years on end. And their sacrifice has to be talked about.
Word. Word. Definitely appreciate your insight. Dr. Love,
Mhm.
peace, brother. So with you being a historian, a noted historian, what was your take on the film?
Um, Man, I loved it. I'll say that first. It was a film that I was looking forward to from the trailer, but cautiously looking forward to because we didn't know a whole lot about what was going to come out of it, and we've been disappointed by these type of films in the past. But I was okay. So there's two parts of it. I was talking to a good friend of mine last night, Cedric, about just the various ways in which we approach the movie. Man, it's like as a film itself, it's just solid, right? Like from the opening scene with the flapping jacket, and it's like this, I mean, like all of that is solid. Cinematography, um, the score, etc. It's just solid. The way it's shot, the acting, superb. and not just from the stars, but the supporting cast, everybody, top to bottom, I thought. And then there's the other way that because of these are the folk who are important to our community. These are the folk that we teach about. These are the folk that we emulate. These are the folk that we study. You want to make sure that the story is done right. So when I found out that I had watched actually Sister Rosa on Jared Ball's show, I think it was last week or the week before, I Mix What I Like, and Chairman Fred was on there, and he was talking about how, him and his mom were on the set, and some of the, he said, we wrestled with some of the decisions that they make. Some of them were just kind of like small things, like you wouldn't button, he didn't give a specific example, but you wouldn't button your coat that way, you wouldn't speak that way, you wouldn't walk into a room that way, etc. But then he also mentioned some nights, well, I think he said, I'm paraphrasing him, that the hotel he was in is probably going to send him a bill for all the nights that he punched holes into the wall from his frustrations and some of the things, but it was a compromise. But he said that, right? This whole thing, being a revolutionary is about this compromise, there's certain things you're going to compromise on. But I was reminded of the feeling we had when Spike's X came out, Malcolm X, and there were folk going into that like, no way the film should be made, one. Others who were excited about it. I was still young, 17, 18 years old, maybe even younger. And it opened up so much to my generation of wanting to go back, kind of like what Sister Rosa was saying in terms of the COINTELPRO, Freedom of Information Act that's being kind of researched now and again, the search going up. We went looking for Malcolm again after that film. And so I hope that's what it does. I don't think any film, man, is going to be complete, right? My younger sister said all historical films are going to have holes in it, right? Which is true. So I don't think we're looking for a complete film, right? To Rose's point again, I think because Chairman Fred and his mother were like, you know what, okay, this is, they weren't, and I'm sure there's things that they would have rather been done different and things like that, but there's also the barometers of what does a film look like in terms of moving the story, all these other things, right? But it was the first time in a very long time that as soon as it went off, I wanted to watch it right back. It reminded me of like the 90s with certain albums that you listen to. As soon as it stopped, you wanted to flip it right back and catch the stuff that you didn't miss. One of the few times in recent history where I wasn't on IMDb Googling the people in the movie while at the same time I wanted to just completely be locked in, partly because of the topic, but also because of the director, the story itself and the way the film was made. But for folk who have been asking me, a lot of my students have been texting me, what did you think about it, etc. I tell them, go into it, watch it, let me know what you think. But I really enjoyed the film in terms of its viewability, but also in terms of the story. I didn't think it was going to be a complete film or a biopic. And I actually would prefer that it wasn't, because it would be so probably incomplete if you wanted to tell Chairman Fred Hampton's whole life story on film. I mean, you would need at least Godfather length type film to tell that story, if not more hours, to tell that whole story of who that brother was. But I hope what it does is awaken interest in young folk or folk who already had an interest to now go do the work of finding out information about him, about the Panther Party and the work that he was doing with the Rainbow Coalition, et cetera, on their own. I think that's what the film can serve as, in addition to the value that it holds, I think.
Word. And it's something you said that resonated, but I'm going to get to that after we get, I'm about to call you Chairman Gabe. Right. I don't know. I'm about to show you Chairman Gabe. We're going to get Gabe Bryant's thoughts. What was your thoughts as a organizer and viewing it from that lens, the film?
Sure. And first of all, I want to thank you, Phil, for having all of us on this show. I think it's a great opportunity to kind of delve into some of these questions. My first thought is that, today I went to and participated in a rally for Mumia Abu Jamal, where we lifted up not only him, but also, Russell Maroon Schultz and Jamil Amin. And I want to really tie that back to what Rosa said earlier, because, we got folks who are on the inside who have been incarcerated in prison for decades. They were still trying to get out. They were still trying to free and release, and they were still trying to support their families. And so this story is serious, right, for many of us, particularly when we still have the state watching us, the state is still telling us, the state is still doing what they can to quell this movement as we begin to kind of push forward with righteous anger, of course. I'm thankful also for Rosa, because I remember being demonized by the campus at Temple University when we brought, Cynthia McKinney to campus back in 07, 08. People were saying, why don't y'all want to, why do you want to divide? Idea was there. Why do y'all want to, you know what I mean? And people was yelling at me. People was cussing me out. People in the FN department was like, Brother Gabe, you sowing division and sowing discord. And I said, hell no, we're gonna do what we gotta do because this is the spirit of Black liberation. And I remember, Sister Cynthia coming through, and so that was obviously when she was running on the Green Party ticket with Sister Rose as the VP ticket back in '08, obviously against President Obama. So it's, a lot of these things are kind of coming full circle for me, right? But I want to ask one fundamental question. If in 40 years we say to ourselves, we're making a film, or some filmmakers say, we're making a film about Rosa Clemente, right? What do you put in 2 hours? Do you know what I mean? In other words, we have this dynamic figure who meant a lot to so many people, who understood the realities of oppression, how to fight it, how to combat it, and in many ways navigated it in a variety of different ways, in electoral spaces, grassroots spaces, global, international spaces, right? How do we fit that in 2 hours and 10 minutes, right? There's going to be somebody who might critique the film from the rip based on something was missing because I was with Rosa, back, in Cuba for had, or I was with Rosa back, in Ferguson, I was with Rosa back. Choices will have to be made to fit Rosa Clemente's life in 2061 into a 2 hour film. And so I really want to start there for the audience because I think it's important that when we think about how we tell story, how we portray narrative, that we're not suffering from, once again, analysis to paralysis. That we're not getting stuck in, if it was up to me, we would have had this, that, or the third. Well, for sure, possibly so. But we have to also understand what is the intention. And so I'll close with this. Last year, we had a press conference for our dear brother Delbert Africa, who I just came home, wanted to move 9. It was January of 2020. And like I had already been talking to Chairman came by because Chairman actually was in communication with Delbert for years, right? Since the beginning of his incarceration. And so Chairman comes, and I always pick him up, and he's coming in from Chicago, and we're talking in the back of the press conference. Brother Gabe is coming along real well. Of course, it was this whole thing with O'Neill, but we got to include, Comrade Cool, so he's excited about it. And I really felt at that moment, this is January 2020. All right, even though I had heard it's going to be from the perspective of Bill O'Neill, who, if you come up with this movement a certain way, you kind of put him in a certain line as far as history tells us. But when he said, you know what, I'm on set, Gabe, so is Comrade Cool, blah, blah, blah. By the way, he calls mom Comrade, right? For those that know, Chairman, right? Yeah. We got Comrade Cool, on set too, so we're gonna be good. I knew in January 2020, in front of Delbert Africa in the front, talking to Pam, that we were gonna be all right. And that's kind of like the spirit that I came into the film watching it, Thank you to Phil who gave me that advanced screener. And when I shared it on Wednesday, when I watched it, I intentionally did not want to give all of my reviews yet, right? I didn't want to taint, I didn't want to skew, I didn't want to paint, I didn't want people to have, because people know Gabe for a certain ideology and perspective anyway. I didn't want that to kind of like paint what you thought going in. Going, as Dr. Anya said, with your own viewpoints, right? Just open with clarity and watch it for yourself. And I'll say this, man, it's an amazing movie. They did a powerful job, and I want to really say kudos to my sister Rosa, and kudos to Chairman Fred Jr. My brother TJ here in Philadelphia, brother TJ Dean, he's an Afrofuturist extraordinaire, activist, dad, right? He said, Gabe, I was on Clubhouse a month ago. Lakeith Stanfield turned up on a Clubhouse talking about the movie, and everybody, I guess was on stage, was like, yo, Lakeith was actually in there talking about the movie. He said, Gabe, it was a powerful experience because to have Lakeith provide his information and process of making the movie and the choices he made. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know that Lakeith initially wanted to play Chairman Fred.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
That's powerful, yeah, Rose. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I'm just gonna
go ahead, jump in.
No, it might seem random before we get to the next question, but first, this is a movie. It's not a biopic. It's not a documentary. It's a movie. It's a Warner Brothers movie. You know what I'm saying? It is beautifully shot. It is, this was a big budget movie for sure. And the reason it was like that was really, folks need to check out the work that Charles Keane is doing with Macro, and like in the last 5 years, I've really been like, whoa, there's a lot out here now that I didn't grow up with, which also they all require critique for sure. That there's a Hollywood apparatus that undercurrents all of this, including all the media exposure now. And then there's a people's apparatus. I'm with the people's apparatus, We need more and more counter programming to this in our face, very real white supremacy. I think about that time in the 60s and 70s, and all the revolutionaries that are still alive will say, we never expected to live past 30. We were going to die for the revolution. Right. And knowing that already, a lot of them had already begun to know from probably weeks in from 68 to 77, all these organizations were infiltrated. That it was a Black Panther Party for self-defense. That was the security threat. It then became Fred Hampton. And it also included Puerto Rican nationalists and the American Indian movement, and that today, these white supremacists are very clear that they want us all gone. They've made it clear. They're ready to eat themselves up, their own young, to die for whatever their America looks like, And then lastly, Lakeith has also spoken about the fact that not only did he want to play Chairman Fred, that he actually had to go through therapy. To deal, because him and Daniel, as well as Dominique, and I want people to understand, Dominique is relatively as a young sister from East New York that has some roles. But what she brought to this movie, and there was a meeting we had where Daniel and Dominique were there, and we met for hours. And after my Mother Comrade Akul was like, are you serious about learning who I am? And she was like, yeah. And they went out at 2 a.m. in the morning in the streets of Chicago, And because Dominique is young and also, one of the few sisters around within the center of the movie, even though there were other sisters. And I like the fact that these sisters were shooting back, not talking about a man. You could see how much she studied. And the poem that she reads, she went to Shaka on set and said, I want to write a poem. Let me write this poem. Like, I think might have happened. And I just read the LA Times piece where Mother Akua said, it made me remember that we also loved each other. So I hope people understand how young she was, and that the fact that she wasn't supposed to live. They were trying to kill her too, so that Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. would not be born. And whatever ancestors were in that shootout or the assassination, not a shootout, she lived. And 25 days later, she gave birth to Chairman Fred Hampton Jr.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Rosa. It's like, one of the things that I think the main critique, obviously, that people talking about is, well, all the time that was spent on Bill O'Neill could have been time spent on learning more from Chairman Fred. And I think, for me watching it, I think I did have some of that critique. I think, if I'm being honest, like I was like, well, those times talking to the Fed, talking to Mitchell, could have been time, where, Chairman Fred's talking about, some of his Marxist-Leninist positions, or, reading, doing different things in the neighborhood of Chicago from west side to south side. And, those choices could have been made. So I definitely have that. I think one thought I had is about the sister who gets arrested, who was shooting out the window, with the shotgun. And I feel like after that scene when she gets arrested, we never see her again. And so I know for me, I was like, whoa, like, what happened to her, right? Yeah. But I think overall, though, what it allows us to do is to kind of peer deeply into like this whole, like for me, my narrative that I've been saying that I'm about to post on social media is the U.S. government is the Judas in this movie, right? And we need to understand that perspective, right? In other words, we got to understand the ways in which, COINTELPRO and the FBI apparatus said, we're going to take advantage of this young 18, 19, 20-year-old man named Bill O'Neill and utilize his resources as a means to infiltrate and disrupt and destroy. right?
Yeah.
So who's the real Judas in the story, right? We
Yeah.
might claim it's Bill O'Neill, but ultimately it's the hidden hand behind him. It's J. Edgar Hoover and
Yeah.
this whole history
Yeah.
of destruction of black and brown, movements. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I want to share. Then also, I'll before we get back to you, Phil, I've had so many of my young people over the years. Shout out to my young boys here in Philly, in Southwest, North. Yo, Mr. Gabe, I seen the movie. Can you point to some other information about,
That's it. That's it.
about Chairman? And so I done texted, Murder for Hampton documentary to like at least 20
Mhm.
people in the
Yep.
past 4
Yep.
days. You know what I'm saying? Because it's on YouTube, right? So you can watch it. I've watched it a gazillion times. I've used it all the time in teaching programs for the past 20 years. But I got all them watching it now, like watching his speeches, and like, yo, Daniel Kaluuya really captured his voice. I'm like, yeah, bro.
Yeah.
So we're having conversations now, right?
Yeah.
About capitalism and socialism, right? We're having those deep dives now as a result of what the film gave them initially, right? And that's also why
Yeah.
this is helpful.
Word. No, listen, I'm just sitting here. I'm a fly on the wall, man, taking in this information, and because it's necessary, right? This isn't a field, an area where I'm an expert, and so I have no problem sitting back and allowing you all to offer your insight and offer your experience. Again, I'm so appreciative of it. For me personally, I looked at the film as an entry point for myself, right? Yes, I've heard about Fred Hampton. Wasn't too familiar with Bill O'Neill or what have you. I think for me, it solidified, even though it was already solidified, just how much of a criminal enterprise the American government is. Because that was the biggest focus for me. I found myself empathizing with Bill O'Neill in a sense where, and it's more thinking that I'm doing about it because I was about to watch the film again before this, and I was like, you know what, let me watch Eye on the Prize too, right? And so I started watching that, and I'm sitting watching this brother, and we forget that they were 20 and 19 and 21.
He was 17 when he was 17 when the FBI
Good
first
boy.
came to him, man.
He's a
17.
boy.
He
Exactly.
was 17, man. Yeah.
And so the empathy, I started to feel empathy for him, right? Because it's like, and you had to buy into what it is that you've done. Because if you really were capable of addressing your thoughts, feelings, and emotions behind that action that took place that caused the demise, the physical demise of so many people, I think you might have died by suicide earlier, right? And so I'm still trying to unpack that. That's the therapist in me. You know what I mean? Just try to unpack those layers when it comes to that. And found myself thinking about Chairman Jr. Just thinking about what that experience is like, right?
Ooh.
As far as not necessarily growing up in the shadow of your father, but that's definitely plays a part, right?
Yeah.
That definitely plays a part. Trying to figure out who you are, your own identity outside of that amazing lineage that you have. And so these were the things that I started to take from it. And like you were saying, Dr. Love and Gabe and Rosa, you just fall. If all things are perfect, you find yourself falling down this rabbit hole on YouTube and just trying to get as much information, not necessarily relying on 1,000 think pieces that pop up, but being able to get information on your own and synthesize it so you truly can understand, and then hopefully impact and inform your life in some way. So again, it was an entry point for me, but something that I truly welcome and embrace where I am now at the age of 37.
I think it's
Go ahead.
also important to understand when you talk to, I was thinking of Dr. Ahmed here and Muhammad Ahmed. One, when we started talking about these revolutionary fighters, man, who need our support now. There's no 401k, there's no pension,
Right.
for these folk, and But I remember Dr. Ahmed talking about folk writing books about RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement, and not coming to him, the founder of RAM. He would be at conferences and the folk would be talking about their research on RAM. And he's like, they never picked the phone up once and called me. And it wasn't an ego thing. It's like, we're still here, right? And so I think even when we look at, I'm talking to one sister who was in the Panther Party, an elder, and telling me that when she sits, and she said she's still learning about the party that she was a part of, right? But folk are writing these incomplete stories. I don't think we can just put it on a film, right? Because even in these supposed books, these scholarly books, folk are approaching it or entering in a way that fits a certain way, tell stories that they want. They don't want to do the heavy lifting of reaching out to folks. They don't want folk to maybe give them a counter story to with a narrative that they were already going to lead with and these type of things. So I don't think it's just a film that we can say, okay, this is the thing. There's also books that we also got to be mindful of and say, hey, even some of these biographies or these scholarly books are incomplete as well. There are, I want, because one of the things that my homie reminded me of last night in the film, he said one of the things I wish could have been done slightly different is for the audience to remember these cats were teenagers and 20 and 21 years old, right? And so like those individuals who survived, who went underground and came back, left the country and came back, right? They're still alive and they're still young and relatively speaking, you know, and still have institutional memory of the party. And I think it's just so important that this reminds folk to, if possible, to make connections with those individuals or to be in spaces with those individuals who can still tell those stories and give the purpose behind what they were doing. Because again, most of them did not think they were going to see 30, let alone 40, right? And I can only imagine the emotional scars that they still walk through of feeling betrayed at times, wondering if they made the right decisions, not in terms of joining the party or revolutionary movements, but in terms of some of the actions. I mean, again, at 20, you talking about overturning an entire imperialist nation and putting it on your backs and saying, we're going to ride out and do this thing, man. And I think the other part that is important that we remember with Chairman Fred, he was doing this since he was a pup. I mean, we come into the film towards the end of his life, but he was doing this as a pup, right? I mean, he was identified as someone who was a great orator, but not just a great orator, not speaking for the purpose of speaking, who was galvanizing those folk in Illinois, right? Bringing those folk to SNCC, bringing those folk to the NAACP chapters. This is why he was brought into the or introduced or brought into to come together with the Panther Party. So I think it's important to remember what we see on screen is not the culmination of who Chairman Fred was. This is a brother who had been groomed into this, who was taking these things serious, who had ideological ideas through his families, etc., in various ways, and then shifted at pivotal points in his life, right? He leaves the ideology or part of the focus of what King is doing, and he shifts more towards other aspects of his life. But I think it's important that we remember this, and also to remember that these soldiers, these revolutionary folk are still alive in our communities, and we need to support them because they did not go into this thinking that they was going to get paid or, you know, see the end of this thing or even see freedom and liberation. The idea behind it, like we know any true revolutionary, is to continue to do the work until the next group is ready to pick up the mantle and do the work.
Yeah, and I also think like, so I've got a lot of people that like, man, why am I having feelings about William O'Neill? And the thing is, he was not the first infiltrator. He wasn't the last. Right now,
That's right.
I could tell you at least 3 people post Ferguson and the rebellion and Black Lives Matter. I know there's at least 2 snitches out there.
Teach.
I know who they are. And part of knowing who they are is my political training. But I've had many people be like, I'm feeling something about William O'Neill. And the thing is, right, because they recruited him, they threatened him, all of that. I don't think it can be forgiven what he did and the floor plan that he gave that got Mark Clark and Fred and other, there were other people too. There were other Panthers up in there. Secondly, there's been debate. Did William O'Neill commit suicide? Maybe the feds took him out because they knew he had just done the eyes on the prize and had mad information. He might have had a lot of records on a lot of other stuff. And you're talking about Chicago, the Daily Machine, the cesspool of politics, but also one of the hubs of self-defense and self-determination. That after Chairman Fred was assassinated and we go into the early 70s to the late 70s, you then have the Black Liberation Army. That's like, we got to do way more than the Black Panther Party. You have the Young Lords, but then you have Los Machateros. When they assassinated Filiberto, who was underground for 30 years in Puerto Rico, people kind of knew where he was, but when the feds took him out, when they did 10 years ago, why? He's been out of the picture for 30 years. Why you, right? Because they have to make a point. No matter how long y'all live, if you fought against this government on Black and brown and human rights, we will find you. We will either assassinate you, incarcerate you, tax you, or, disappear you. One of the most important things that you see Chairman Fred saying this is, anywhere there are people, there's people power. So for me, as an academic, a historian within Africana studies, Pan-African studies, Black studies, I don't want our history of the Black Panther Party or the BLA, the Macheteros or the Young Lords. I don't want it written by Pinnell Joseph. And I really don't care what Black people that are Democratic thing are now like, oh, Fred, the revolutionary. Yeah, I'm not trying to hear that from you anymore. Because if Chairman Fred was here right now, maybe we wouldn't be in this position, and all our elders who've been taken out or had to flee or have political asylum. The flip side is we have to be now, I'm all for the critique. Yes, all of it. But you know what? Let's critique the fact that in most of these cities where our people are being murdered and lynched in daylight by police are run by Democrats, period. And I'm like, I don't want to hear one Black, Latino, Democratic, and I saw one and I sent off a shit of tweet storms because I was like, yo, the work, and you know what? And in fact, what really pissed me off was the fact that the organization, or they're called participant media, that did the social justice panels for all of this. The fact that you have DeRay McKesson saying the word of Fred Hampton, the fact that you have DeRay McKesson.
Don't get me started.
Wow.
Hosting a panel about Fred Hampton. That's what I'm angry at.
Right.
Because I'm like, where you been the last year and a half? I don't know. Now you all of a sudden pop up just like you did in Ferguson. I said it 7 years ago and I'll say it again. Like, yo, if we're not willing to be real honest, if we're willing to take like certain Black academics that have made their career on Ferguson and never been on the ground, abandon those people all the way to now, I don't want to hear nobody in Black studies, Pan-African studies, Africana studies, none of that talking about what you would do. What will you do? Nothing. Sit on a computer and type. You never been even visited one of our political prisoners. And I want people to realize that is my academic thing. I've been in academia for 20 years under Black studies. I know that the type of Black studies, Latino studies should be revolutionary. Even in an academic sense, some of us carry the tradition that Dr. Turner told us, scholar activism. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got people like Dr. John Bracey, Bill Strickland, Dr. Shabazz, Dr. Sanchez, they're still with us. These are giants of Black study who created enclaves so that someone like me, and I'll stop here to bring it all together. I was born in the Bronx. I was raised in the Bronx and in the suburbs of Westchester County in New York. I never heard of the Young Lords Party, the Black Panther Party, till I went to college. Okay, and most of us don't grow up in the movement. So college for me, and seeing Dr. Gordon say something, or she brought Hakeem out of Booty, and that's what I learned from Dr. Marta Moreno Vega, who are still with us to this day. I'm like, how'd I grow up in a very Puerto Rican centered household and never heard of the Young Lords Party? Like that's, and I grew up in New York City in the time of hip hop. And that's what a lot of us have to understand, that also we got comrades in our lives and friends in our lives whose parents survived that, but they as children have lived through that. And some of them, many of them prefer to stay private for many reasons. But one of them being casting that shadow on the son or the daughter, the non-binary child in your life is the wrong thing we need to be doing. And Chairman Fred Jr. has spoke about this. He's like, it's been a blessing and a burden. But we have to have empathy and compassion, knowing that they've been wanting to, they try to kill your family. So at one point when you were growing up, the feds came to your house or your dad or mom disappeared. And these people who are comrades now in this generation, they're here too. And that watching this movie also was triggering for a lot of them. I got a lot of texts that were like, I can't even watch the whole thing right now. I have to do it in pieces.
Right. And I think one thing that Rosa just said that's so powerful is that,
It's okay.
yeah. That's all good.
Shaking the room up over there.
I'm about to say the energy's coming through.
Yeah,
You know
man. Yeah. That was that Ashe. That was that Ashe.
Instagram. I needed the show tonight. I've had a lot to say.
Yeah, no, it's good. You know, I think one thing that I'm thinking, even pulling out what you just said, is that, you know, particularly for organizers, activists, educators, like we should feel comfortable in our discomfort around this film, right? If you watch this film, and like many of us, we've read all the FBI files and all the, you know, we've heard from the master teachers who talked about William O'Neill in a certain context for decades, but now we kind of see him presented in a different fashion in the way that Lakeith Stanfield acts about it. We should feel comfortable and embrace that discomfort, right? And kind of wrestle with it. Because everybody I know, my timeline saying, I want to talk about it because I don't know how I feel. That's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. Because I think what it tells us is, one, we're human beings. One, we understand that there's nuance, that there's things, that there's layers to this thing, there's levels to it. And sometimes we also hold people like Chairman Fred Sr. in a particular positionality that, you know what I mean? So it allows us to kind of to confront that, right? And to interrogate it in a way that's, I think, actually healthy for our movement. Also, real quick, I want to give a quick plug and shout out to my comrade, Dr. Johanna Fernandez, who wrote a phenomenal book called The Young Lords, A Radical History. Please pick it up. I'm about to say, Rosa probably got it right there. Yeah. Pick up Johanna's book, The Young Lords, A Radical History by Johanna Fernandez. It is incredible. It's an incredible history and arc of the Young Lords Party. It's amazing. Pick it up now. But my last point I wanted to say is like, hey, man, there's been, I think, a shift. I'm no filmmaker, right? But I recognize that like the days of like Malcolm X, Ray, like the whole like 3-hour sweeping epic from birth, like now it's like, let's do a Selma, right? I'm gonna give you 1 year of a person's life. I'm not giving you the birth to death narrative, right? That's just the filmmaking choice that I know that people are kind of choosing nowadays. Fine. And so if that's the case, and this film allows us to look into those, I guess, 16 months or so. I think the value of it is that we get to learn about COINTELPRO deeply. We get a chance to learn deeply about Chairman Fred's positions and values and ideas. You know, when we hear at the Black Panther headquarters, them saying, show discipline, right? I mean, those word choices and choices around what they were about as far as trying to, you know, the scene with regards to, you know, Bill O'Neill trying to, well, I don't want to show everything, right? But there are certain scenes that I think allow us to look at what were they thinking in such a young person's mind. And I want to also close by saying this. My comrade here in Philadelphia, Raphael Randall, dope activist, made an interesting point about the age piece. He said, you know, had these folks been played by younger actors, for some folks in the current context may not have believed the film. Because we haven't created or incubated a space right now that supports and nurtures young organizers healthily, right? Or rather, they haven't seen it, particularly that young, right? And so they might have watched. In other words, if you were to cast the guys that played in Central Park 5, it probably could have happened to play those two individuals. Some folks might have kind of went with it saying, I don't know. Like it might have been a little bit, you know what I mean? And so it's, again, we don't know because it's all hypothesis, but I think it's helpful to think about what haven't we done, right? What haven't we done to support and nurture and grow and develop young activists of that age group, right? 19, 18, 17, to really be at the forefront, right? Obviously, in the last decade, we pushed it. We say a lot in our rhetoric, but are they all the time, you know, on the panel? Are they all the time the headliner speaker? Are they all the time speaking out on the Zoom? Maybe not. And so let's also take a step back and think about what we can do better also in this time period.
Well,
Sister Rosa,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the things she mentioned, I'm going to reference the interview on Jared Ball's show again, when she talked about that shadow that's cast, man. And one of the really telling moments of that interview is when Chairman Fred said he had heard about a brother. He was talking, I think the question was like, what pressure is it on you to be the son of, you know, Chairman Fred? And he talked about this one time, man, where he said he heard about this brother who was going around. I think it was Chicago, saying he was the son of, or Chairman Fred was his dad. You know, Chairman Fred Sr. was his dad. And Chairman Fred Jr. said he went looking for the brother, and he met him. He said, "Man, I heard you've been going around, and the way the story's going, you think it's going to go one way, right? Like, I heard you. What's this thing you saying? My dad's your dad, but." The brother says no. Well, he is my dad, but also he mentioned a couple other elders who are important in our community. I don't want to misquote him, but he mentioned a couple others. And what Chairman Fred said in that interview was, he said he was wishing he had a brother, right? He said he was wishing he had a brother so he wouldn't have to he could go through this with someone, And initially when he was telling us, so I'm thinking he's saying like, hey, don't be going around saying my father's your father type thing. But no, he said he was, because that shadow, it looms so heavy, and I'm like, I think Gabe mentioned it, that maybe it's the Rosa, that double-sided sword of, you want your father to be it clearly, but you don't know what that, what does that shadow loom, even in his absence, what is that shadow like, to have to know that you're going to be responsible for that, and also know you're going to be targeted because of who you are and who you represent, and the family that you represent, but also the organizations that you represent, and to have to carry that around. I can't imagine what that means to go through that on your own to some degree, you have the camaraderie, of course, of your comrades, but to have someone who you could actually say, hey, this is my blood brother, my biological brother or sister, has to be something different.
Word. You all touched on each of the questions that I was going to ask, but I do want to double back to what you were referencing. Well, first let me say, again, this was an entry point for me to Fred Hampton, to that entire story. And once I found out how old Fred Hampton was, Bill O'Neill was, I was frustrated, and I'm not gonna say anger, but I was taken aback, and I was like, well, why did they get Daniel? Why did they get Lakeith, who looked much older? And then I had to think even more in depth to think that, what, this is the same thing they said about the little sister who got pepper sprayed in Buffalo, in not Buffalo, in
Rochester.
In Rochester, right? Mm-hmm. That she probably looks older than,
good point.
And so divorcing myself from
what they
this
said
idea,
about Mike Brown.
Exactly, divorcing myself from this idea of white supremacy and what they say black folk are supposed to look like at a certain age. And so then I was able to actually enjoy it a little bit more, right? Once I was like, okay, divorcing myself. And I think that's the biggest thing for me in this, is just divorcing myself from just a lot of these ideas and preconceived notions that come from the various commentary that you tune into prior to, that help shape your perspective. Hence the reason why I do think it's important that we go into, especially films like these, with not having that information or lack thereof truly influence how we show up. Especially if you're somebody like me who's a babe in this type of information. For individuals who are seasoned, clearly you can go in and be able to call BS or be able to recognize. And so that was just one of my takeaways. But I do want to get to you, Gabe, and I don't want to hold you all, because we could have this conversation for hours.
Oh wait,
so go ahead.
Phil, can I just Phil?
Oh yeah, do your thing.
No, because I know I'm already getting text messages about how I shouldn't have mentioned dude in a blue vest, and I'm like, no, I should actually mention him. Why? Because I think about the process of this movie, but I also think about all the organizers out here, the new ones and the OGs, and I'm in that hip hop generation of like almost OGs, according to my daughter, who is herself her organizer and coming into her political self as an activist and an organizer, to make this connection. Again, as someone who wasn't brought up in the movement, when I did join the movement, it came through the Malcolm X grassroots movement. And when I joined, we had just started the Black August concerts, a celebration of hip hop and freedom fighters, where it talked about our political prisoners and prisoners of war. And also was what Nahanda Abiodun had told some of the members of Malcolm X grassroots movement, including some other folks in other organizations, that like, yo, if this hip hop thing is real, then use it. And that's what we did with Black August for almost over 15 years. Now, the Black August, one of the ones, it took a minute before you could like end up being on the production element of that. And the year I was part of the production element and like doing a lot of work around it was in 2003, right? And that's when I had just finished a couple months before my tour with M1 and Chairman Fred. So this Black August, Chairman Fred came to it and we had it in Brooklyn. And the crazy thing is the 2 days after that was this large Northeast blackout where like all the Northeast had a blackout in 2003. Shaka, when we started even talking more, he's like, yo, you know, I was at that concert where Fred Hampton was there, Black August, and I had just become a film student at NYU.
Wow.
I was like, what? He's like, I grew up in Brooklyn and I really never heard of him. I heard of him. So he's at that show in 2003. Years later, he has worked with the Lucas brothers, who are actually comedians, who were like, yo, you need to write this story. I know somebody already kind of talking about it, about Chairman Fred Hampton. So then that goes, you know, in a way through me, but then Ryan made it Ryan Coogler and Cindy Coogler made a purposeful choice that this was their next movie after Black Panther. I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Like Black Panther, Wakanda, and the real Black Panther, you know? And then Charles King. So you see all these connections. That's what happens when you're an organizer. Ultimately, you have to be like, I might not know everything, but I'm the bridge, I'm the connector. Or you see someone like Shaka, who was so influenced, and he, before this process started, had taken 2 years to read anything and everything he could to reach out. So young folks have to understand there comes a time when you're doing this work where you're like, oh, most all the pieces are fitting. It's not perfect, but what do we do with it? And again, what I really, if anything, I want people to go to Jericho Movement. I want people to go to Jalil Muntaken. We're going to be supporting him because we're close in Rochester. But if you already know Rochester, like you mentioned before, Daniel, Purdue, and not, you can understand that the conditions of Black and brown people outside of New York City are even worse than people would imagine. I want people to support the Move family. I want people to see 40 Years a Prisoner, you know, that Africa. Like the fact that his mom had a baby and had him in a cell, like that's what I want people to do. Like I'm all for, yes, please, we can critique things. That's the beauty of us. But ultimately the beauty of us as a people, which allows some people to humanize William O'Neill, is that we want liberation for everybody. All right, even you crazy ass white people who don't know, I don't know what 75 million y'all are thinking. Not all of you deserve any compassion. Most of you don't. But that when we talk about our liberation, we're talking about everybody being free because we have humanity. Because really, if we went out the way these white people are coming at us, we'd be in a real bloody ass war right now. Like I sometimes I'm like, we are a good people. We are real, like a beautiful, loving. Lastly, as Frantz Fanon says, and he, like I tell all young people, read Frantz Fanon, Black Skin, White Mask, but everything. He ultimately says, do not let white supremacy take your joy of resistance. You know, and that we have to begin to also get our young people to understand that even though they're sacrificing this, there is a joy that I know I feel every night, even when things are bad, like my people. We're not going nowhere. We're not going anywhere. We're resisting. And that's what I want young people to really, if anything, get out of this movie. Like we resist, we're here, and you know, it's a struggle. That's it. You want to be down, then it's called a struggle. It's not a trend, hashtag, it's not 9 to 5. It's who you are and what you put out there and your values, ethics, principles, and politics.
Word. Word.
Brother Phil, can I ask Sister Rosa a question?
Listen, brother, do your thing.
All right. Sister Rosa, I don't want you to give away too much of the closed door meetings or too much of the film, but one of the things that I loved about the movie, there was no white savior. There was no white, white potion set up for us to sympathize with them. For at a second, I thought they were about to do it with, with the main cat. When I'm probably talking about that one scene when they come into the room. I thought they were going to do. Was there any discussions about having that, not having that? You know what I mean? Or how, was that, because I know that's always on the table with
That's a great point.
With these type of films, right? And it allowed, and I wonder, because my concern was, if we don't feel sympathy for O'Neill, who is going to be the character that we are, like the antagonist that we have to feel sympathy for? And I was hoping they wasn't setting it up for the white boy, but were there any discussions about that? I don't know if you're able to kind of discuss that, but that's just something I'm dying to know. Was there any discussions about it, that being the case, and not push back, but saying, nah, that we can't do that. That's not one of the non-negotiables. Was that ever a concern?
No, I mean, there was discussions about that, I feel like some of us were like, yeah, don't even give this dude any time. Like,
no doubt.
no one's, because there is a point, right, where you see his character. It is a somewhat developed character, and more I was like, oh, no. But definitely there are no white saviors up in here. And really the best thing I think about it really is the showing of the Rainbow Coalition.
That was it. Yeah.
And Shaka had that from the giddy up. Also, it would have never happened without that. And then also we begin to place this term outside of the Jesse Jackson Democratic thing. Some people even had some issues with the white guy that represented the white patriots, right? Because people were like, oh, the Confederate flag. It was like Chairman Fred actually went and spoke that actually happened, So and I'll tell you this: the 2 days I was on this set, and knowing Chairman Fred so well, or I'd be like, you picking your battles? He's like, yeah. And I like coffee. I was at one point like, you cannot drink any more coffee in this. But I got some time with him, and he's been honest. It's been a lot of struggle. It has been a lot. And I think it's going to continue to be a lot of struggle, honestly, but I know that we do, I know I came to the table with everything I know and who I am, period. There's some reasons that I don't need to do certain interviews. Because a lot of people have been like, oh, you're not, I'm like, I'm good, dude. I don't need to talk to Hollywood Reporter or Variety.
Right.
Like, and Jared and I doing that show, I was like, yes, Jared, because Jared is a journalist. He's a social media critic. He was going to ask the question like, or break down the critiques. I'm more looking at it like it's here. We can do something with it,
That's it.
And he's my comrade. Like for me, I was telling people, yo, don't be hating on like anybody who has critiques. Steel sharpens steel. He's a comrade. And we know what he's doing for us as a people.
I'm looking forward to the other cultural productions that comes out of this film, right? I'm looking forward to
movie right now.
Listen, this is what I'm saying. I'm looking forward to stage plays.
Which one you said? What was that?
Young Lords. We don't have, I'm like, I'm thinking, can I write a screenplay or can I find somebody? And
you can.
Well, I'm sure there's some screenplay Boricuas right now that could write that better, and I could support them in that process.
There you go.
But to that point, real quick though, I think that there are some legacy picks that really need to be like more of like a series, than like a 2 hour. Like, you know what I mean? Like, can we watch like a 10 episode type of situation? Like that's really got to be like the plan also.
That's a good idea.
Word. Definitely.
One thing I was gonna say also,
you know what, Gabe?
Go ahead, bro.
This is just completely fantasy.
Go ahead.
That 10 episode, then you could tell a larger story of the Panther Party.
This is what I'm saying.
Not just in the Bay, not just in Chicago, but everywhere where they were, overseas, internationally, everywhere, but you could tease that story out, man. That would be something brilliant to see.
You could get more intricate, for instance, with the Rainbow Coalition, you know what I'm saying? And kind of flush it out more, some of the contradictions, you know what I mean? Things of that nature. I think that's something valuable too. And look, at the end of the day, man, we have to also honor the fact that there's going to be some of us, including many of our elders, who are like, y'all can't watch it. We don't bang with, we don't bang with Holly Weird, you know what I'm saying? And we cool because I lived it. So I'm gonna let y'all cook, but I'm over here with mine. You know,
Yeah.
we gotta honor that, right? We gotta
Yep.
say, you know what, it's
Yep.
cool. You know, same thing happened with Malcolm and other films that kind of came
Yeah.
out, and Angela Davis and others.
Yeah.
Let it cook. It's okay. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it is what it is.
And I think to that point, Gabe, we gotta remember this is in fiction. For some folk, they were, you know, for all
That's what I'm saying.
in the trenches, man. This is there's a level up still, I'm sure, of distrust, PTSD, all of these things, man, that I don't need. One, I lived it, so I don't need to watch it. Two, it's too triggering, you know, to use that term. It's too triggering for things that are still not dealt with, or for things that I'm still working through.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So these are lived experiences of some folk, and we have kind of this ability to be on the sideline, you know, to be able to watch these things and to learn from these things, man, and be encouraged from these things. But I think for a lot of folk, like you said, man, there's some who are the Holly Weird group, right? None, you know, that.
You know
there's
about
other
that?
groups like, you know, I may not have been in the Panther Party, but I was in this other organization that was doing some similar things, and we still have, you know, so for some folk, they're not going to put eyes on.
What's interesting about that is that we all know how it ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like but to then see and it be very accurate to even the language, it's like we all know what happens at the end. Why would, you know, people would be like, you know, look, I got a lot of cousins. My mom has 15 siblings, and by the grace of the ancestors, all of them are here except for one at this moment. So I have mad cousins. Unfortunately, I have some of them that are like, I've been cut off with their anti-Blackness, even though they're like half Puerto Rican, they're Trump bullshit. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to that family reunion, and you ain't coming to the crib ever again in my life. You know, I've been pretty clear about that for years. Especially young people, what do you do with your family? I'm like, you work with them, but at a certain point, it's abusive, right? And I'm like,
it is.
So I go, F it, I'm gonna post it on my family's Facebook page, knowing that a good portion of my cousins are gonna be like, the propaganda, even though
there she go again.
Their propaganda is like, that's some fairy tale you living in. And one of my younger, so he would be my second cousin, who really, for the most part, is just like, you know, been raised probably within like a white context, you know, and he's in law school in Chicago, and he's like, this is exactly why I want to do the law that I want to do. And I was like, it's crazy because he's so younger, really never had a lot of discussions with him. I was like, what made you want to do like basically social justice law? And he was like, because I'm tired of seeing innocent people locked up. So then he puts on the family, like he was like, I'm so happy to have seen this boy and all this. And I was like, I told my sister, I'm like, yo, our family Facebook page is about to be real hot. Right? And I was like, you know what? My little cousin, who I really don't know that well, was like, yo, it got me even wanting to do more of the law that I, you know, wanted to. Can I hit you up? I was like, for sure. I'm here. But for me, just on some personal family, I was like, and my dad, my mom, you know, Alicia, my daughter, is like, I'm like, what do you think about it? She's like, I'm still critiquing, because they're having the youth group that she's part here for folks that are in Albany, New York. I'll send the flyer out. Anybody could join. We're going to have Chairman Fred on. It's going to be intergenerational dialogue. So my daughter's like, yo, if I have to cut you off, how do I do it? I'm just like, cut me off. She's like, but mom, I'm like, but Alicia, you know what to do. So now she's like, I've got to watch it once to get through it. I got to watch it the second time to write my notes and critiques. And I'm watching the third time so that I know what to talk about organizing my friends. And she's 16, you know. Flip side of that on the family stuff is, my husband's been real supportive, but he hasn't watched it. And I don't think he wants to. He knows how it ends. He's more like, I really don't want to see like Black Death.
Right.
I'm like, I hear you, bro, but you know, you gotta watch it. I'm your wife. You gotta one time.
There you go.
Used to see your name in the credit scrolls, man.
But that's the funny thing. He goes, oh my God, that's your name. I'm like, dude, because obviously as my husband, he has been there from day second one and seen me go through my process and stuff. And he's like, yo, your name is up there. Then his boys in New York City, his boys are like, yo, I'm telling people I'm watching the movie. I see I see Rosa. That's your wife. And then one of his friends was like, I know his wife. And of course his boys were like, yo, you don't know that. And he's like, no, that's my friend. So things like that for me, just because I love people, and I want them to get as much as they can. But at the end of the day, I'm proud as hell over the work that I did.
You should be.
You should be. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I
mean,
and I love it.
One thing I was going to say is that, just as a salute to you, you should be proud of your work on this. But I also was going to offer just maybe a slightly different position. I believe that just from the spirit of Black and brown and indigenous creativity, that might not have been how it ended. What did we find out? We know that Mama Akua was with the Panther Party, until 78. So, so imagine if we would have been able to continue that story of how they were organizing in Chicago still beyond his assassination. What were they doing? What were they doing to pick up the pieces? What were they doing to kind of still mobilize folks and organize around the breakfast program, the clinics? There's a continuation, right? There's a continuum of this arc of like the Panthers in Chicago that also could have been, what I'm saying? Like, again, thinking about, because again, my whole thought is, look at it as this shouldn't be the only Fred Hampton film that we get, right?
That's
like,
it. That's
somebody should be sitting there right now saying, you know what? That was incredible. And in a few years, I'm gonna do it from this perspective. And I want to hit it from this arc, right? And so there's space, I think, from Black genius perspective that says, how can we tell the story even deeper? And this is just the start, right? This is like chapter one of the Fred Hampton experience. And we're gonna get other chapters in the future. That's how we should go at it, with a sense of like revolutionary enthusiasm, revolutionary hope that we're going to produce more product that can tell our story and narrative in the proper African way. That's got to be our position.
It makes me think, Gabe, of Death of a Prophet, right? With Morgan Freeman playing Malcolm X, how it just tells a particular part. I mean, this comes, of course, years before, but it tells a particular part of Malcolm's life, that last 24 hours and, some reflection, stuff like that, where that don't necessarily even get covered in Spike's X, you know what I mean? So I hope I hope folks see, because I think we need to learn about, the Panther Cubs and the rise of that, the organization that Fredman Chair is still a part of, so, and how did that come out of that Panther movement to Chicago and all the other stuff, man? Yeah, that would be good. That would be good.
Yeah, at the end of the day, man, I'm a young kid who grew up, born and raised in East New York, Brooklyn, who remembers when Michael Stewart and Yusuf Hawkins was the story of the day, and people was outside organizing and building. And I went to high school in the Bronx and didn't find out that Kwame Ture went to my high school till after. I go to Bronx High School of Science. Yeah, I go to Bronx Science, and for 4 years I'm there. I never knew one day that Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, went to that high school. I had to find out in my 20s. You follow me? Well, actually, in college. And so when I think about it from that perspective and the ways that we just institutionally don't tell our history, it's fascinating to me. You know what I'm saying? But also it's harmful, because I felt a sense of betrayal, when I found that out. And I'm taking that back to what Rosa was saying about how, not knowing about the young lords and just what that does to a person, right? To feel that sense of like, wait a minute, like, why didn't I find out in 4 years that this person should be like on a wall, like he should have a picture, you know what I'm saying? Like he should have something, in the building. So these are just some of the real things that I think about. But at the end of the day, I think, again, I'm thinking about all the young people who are organizers, mobilizers, who are trying to do this work right now, activists, and who can use this movie as a tool for conversation, for PE, for, discussion groups, to spawn some reading study groups. Like, hopefully we'll be able to use this film in that capacity.
And that was going to be my question, just where we are in terms of strategic organizing and community engagement in 2021, comparatively speaking to, during that time period.
Yeah, I would say now, because I have to get to my next interview at 8:30. I really appreciate.
Oh, no doubt. I appreciate you coming on.
It's been the best one, in terms of just it took me the weekend to really process everything and hear. But look, I think we're in a very dangerous time for our people. I think what January 6th showed us is the continuing white nationalism and white supremacy in this country. And I think that young organizers and even some of us who in my generation have falling for the okey doke of the Democratic Party and the two-party system, I think it's very instructive to show what the Democrats did in this farce of an impeachment trial.
Mm.
At the end, y'all all caved anyway, right?
Mhm.
Exactly. Right. And the Republicans, oh no, not at all. Not at all. And they're becoming stronger. They're becoming stronger in their conspiracy theory, but also where they're all embedded with. They're embedded all the way from the top of the executive, to my belief, all the way to the bottom, and their police, military, and all of that. I think we really have to take the words of Malcolm X, y'all, or let's say Robert and Mabel Williams.
Come on, come
Self-defense
on,
and
come on.
self-determination right now.
Mhm.
I'm in upstate New York, and you best believe there's a Proud Boy chapter in Albany, New York, and there's
Mhm.
one in Philly. So I don't know what that
Mhm.
shit looks like in Alabama or Arkansas or in Iowa. That the number of Latinos that are dying due to COVID, because they're literally going to work and dropping dead at work, it is an abomination. And what's happening to the Native American community. I think if we don't make a hard pivot right now to really leaving all that neoliberal, I don't want no emails about the impeachment trial for no Black and brown organizations. I want to hear about Black capitalism, Latino capitalism. I'm done. Like, I don't want to hear none of that. And we better do some massive type of, not even education, raising the consciousness right now.
That's it. That's it.
We're in a
That's it.
bad, and it's not just within these borders, but
Mhm.
this is how insidious this system is, right? Here you now have Biden and Harris, all the promises they made about bringing children back together, but they haven't halted deportations.
Mhm.
Why aren't these children all together? It's the government. Y'all don't know how to figure it out. You've been in there for a month. It's not a lot. But the fact that they're continuing the deportations on the flip side, always talk about racial equity. I'm shutting down the border. But tangentially on this, I just read today that the Minneapolis Police Department had just received $6.4 million to hire new cops and train them right.
Teach.
So you lynch a Black man and you get rewarded for it.
That's right.
Mhm.
So the fact that young people some people are in this, if we're visible and on social media, we have power. We don't have, that's not power, y'all. That's just some really nice, beautiful representation that white nationalists and neoliberals, all the way to the white liberals, they don't mind if we're gone. If we don't serve the purpose of labor, why would they want us here?
Mhm. Mhm.
We better make that hard pivot real quick. And I'm talking like within the next 3 to 6 months, or we're going to be in a catastrophic situation here and globally that we won't even know how to come up out of it. So if anything, like, defend yourself and defend your community. We got to live to fight.
We got
Listen,
my final point, real quick,
Go
Phil,
ahead.
if I could. My final point just is, I think Rosie put that last point. I think
No doubt.
it's really important to seize the time, right, and seize this moment. But my whole thought that I really wanted to say for tonight about the film is, let's please not use one's critique, love, or like, or hate, or hate as like some sort of like revolutionary litmus test,
Litmus.
right?
Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you.
Like,
Thank
let's
you.
not be like juvenile, right? Like, we can be, adults and clear-minded. Let's please not use one's critiques and thought processes as a ways in which to gauge or judge one's connection to the people or one's love for the people. Like, let's act in love and know that people are intelligent and they have their own mind, family. Let's not disparage folks and hate on folks for their thoughts on a film.
Yep. If I can just add to that, Gabe, especially for young folk, as well as older folk, for young folk, when they get excited about this film, don't kill their excitement and tell them what books they need to be, like, don't be that folk either. You know what I mean? Like, there's a way that we can gracefully bring them forward and be able in a position to pass the baton, but let's not beat them down if what they see is not what we think they should be seeing in the film, or the ideas that they got from the film is not what we think it should be because we feel as though we're more experienced or more read, right? Let them have this moment the way we had our moments at different times, and then move them towards further advance them, gracefully so that they don't get burnt out as well, or get discouraged, because it's the worst thing in the world to come to someone and you're excited about something. And as my son says, yucking my yum, my 6-year-old son,
Right.
culture, so don't yuck my yum. In other words, like Dave said, let me eat, let this thing breathe. And then maybe just let's sit with the excitement that I have, right? And then maybe we can come back and have this conversation a little later about some other things, but not in this dogmatic approach, because that's not what Brother Fred did. That's not how he drew people in. And I think that was a good point that they showed in the film when when the young people came to help them out at that one moment. He said, "This is how you reach the people." You know what I mean? Like, and that was it. And I love that relationship that they showed in that moment of, these are going to be the next ones when we ain't here, and maybe they're going to be next sooner than we actually thought that they would have to be, but they're going to be ready, and we're going to do it with love.
Word. And I'm not going to yuck the yum, so I'm just going to say, listen, because I'm not going to yuck the yum, so I'm just going to say I'm so appreciative of
Love you, Phil.
the
Love
good
you,
brother,
Phil.
love you too, brother, good brother Gabe, Dr. Love, Rosa Clemente for coming through. I do this thing here probably about 3 times a week, Monday through Wednesday. I got class from 6 to 8 tomorrow, so it's probably going to start at 8. But subscribe to you on YouTube at Phil MSW. These are the types of conversations that I have on a daily basis. I want to shout out Tessica Brown. We talk about we don't deserve black folk. Certain black folk don't even deserve black folk. Donating $20,000 from her GoFundMe to hair restoration. So we got to celebrate one another. We got to love on one another, because it's so important. It's so necessary. So I'll see y'all tomorrow at 8 p.m. Thank you. Peace.
Thank you, Gabe. Love you, bro.
Love you too, Rosa.
All right.
Peace,
Thank you.
Gabe.